All right. Well, thank you everyone for sticking around to the final talk of the day. We have an amazing panel of awesome humans here. I'm going to let y'all go ahead and introduce yourself. So why don't y'all come on up stage and have a seat and just and take it away. All right. Shriner music.
Oh, you. Or should we?
You want to get us started?
Is this
All right. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Testing.
We want to try something that probably has never been tried before here. So we're going to start with a 5-minute monologue by Obscure Nerd.
Yes. Yeah. Keep it going. Keep it going, my friends. Let me hear from the back. Let me hear from the front. The middle. No, we don't want to hear from them. We don't want to hear from them. Shout out, yes, I'm Obscure Nerd. If you haven't heard of me, that's perfect. Then my name's working. If I change it to anything else, then I would just be Nerd, which is what they called me in high school. Shout out. I don't know why I pointed at you. I am so excited to be here, though. These are my brilliant friends. I am not a developer myself. I'm an actor and a comedian in the virtual space. So basically, I'm saying I'm a moron. And I have a lot of respect for you all. But through the power of community, AR and VR, and my desire to create new forms of entertainment with technology, I met these beautiful, amazing, brilliant people. And they've been continuing to blow my mind day after day, minute after minute even. Talk to them for 2 minutes. It'll be 2 blowns. You know the vernacular. But I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk to you guys about some of the tools. You know, I came into this space wanting to find new ways to create forms of entertainment and forms of narrative media using technologies that people haven't been exploring yet, but I have zero technical background. And through working both with AI tools as well as my friends here in collaboration and community, we've done some, we've been able to build some really cool stuff that we're going to be talking about. Shout out to the VR people. Where are they at? VR? In the house. Where are my AI people at? The chatbot's going to respond in 20 minutes when it finally understands what I said. He's back. Yeah, they have that little owl back there. He's watching. Where are my mixed reality people at? Mix it up, baby. Mix it up. If you're a real reality person, I think you're at the wrong conference. There's a Denny's across the street. You can wait there and figure it out. Go figure it out. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Let me just introduce my friends. We're all going to introduce each other. We're going to be showing you guys a little bit of the work that they have done in AR and some of the work that I've done with AI, and then we'll just kick it off and start a conversation. So keep it going. Keep it going for my friends here. Let's get this going.
Are we all going to take turns up
How
at the
do
podium?
we change between the slides?
Can we go to the next slide?
Oh, this one?
Oh.
Nice.
This is shortcuts for AR developer tools, not PowerPoint presentation tools. So.
Okay, so I'm Allan. I'm a former or a current member of AR House as well. I've been doing mostly the Wizarding game on the right. It's a multiplayer game built on Snapchat. You can play it on phone and on spectacles. Right now we're trying to build it out on Camera Kit, which is essentially a wrapper for iOS and Android apps. So we'll see how that goes. And then on the left side, you see an application that I've been working on for blind people. I've been working on similar stuff since 2017. We were more hardware approached back then, but now I think it's really just a software problem. And let's go to the next guy. Pratik. Try to click the green button.
Next year we'll do the PowerPoint presentation.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Pratik. I started out as a filmmaker. I actually shot my first feature film back in Taiwan. Then I moved back to the US, and after a couple months, everything shut down. And so there were no film sets to go on, and so I decided, let's try learning how to do this virtually. So I picked up Unreal Engine, and then spent a couple of years learning that, and then as the world started opening up again, met these amazing friends at AR House and at the MIT Reality Hack, and then all of a sudden, these random skills that I had been learning all kind of clicked together, and that's what you're kind of seeing here. It's like a collection of different film, VFX, AR projects. What I really like to do is work at the intersection of all these technologies. Instead of focusing on what to do and what to use, I kind of try to come up with a silly concept and then learn what I need to pull that off. And so, yeah. On to Tahnee.
Cool.
Woo!
No, on to Andy.
On to Andy first.
Aha!
We're
A
super
bait and
organized.
switch. No one saw this coming. Yeah, so I'm Andy, also known as Obscure Nerd VR on YouTube, and much like Pratik, I started as a film actor, a screenwriter, and during COVID, I wanted to find new ways to express myself, because as a stand-up comedian as well, nobody wanted to be in a room, or was legally allowed to be in a room filled with people to do comedy for 2 years. So I had to find new ways to take comedy and my sense of timing and my sense of entertainment to new mediums that were able to connect people across different places. So I started my YouTube channel where it started as a comedic exploration and finding new ways to showcase virtual reality games and tech in a fun and entertaining way to invite people in who really didn't think they had an interest in this till they opened up to it. The top left is some of the newer stuff I've been doing. I've been wanting to do animated film for so long, and again, I'm not an animator. So through Wonder Dynamics, AI, and then some collaborations with my friends to clean things up, I'm able to make films that were never possible for me alone before. And then this middle section here is a video I've been doing where I'm treating AI as a tool for yes and improvisation and comedy. That's an AI girlfriend app, which I don't recommend. I don't recommend getting too deep into. But it's created a whole new form of storytelling where I allow the AI's responses to take us to new places and create new narratives together that was never possible with human-to-human collaboration. And in the bottom left, you'll see here, this is virtual reality comedy. I've been working with the Fail to Render Comedy Club, where we've been taking live stand-up comedy, the full experience. Everybody turns their mic on. You're all in the same room in a club. And you're able to have that experience of 50 people in a room, laughing together, heckling at each other, loving each other, and sometimes hating each other without ever leaving your bedroom. So, on to Tahnee.
Hello. Oh my God. Hi, I'm Tahnee. I'm an animator. I've got a background in 2D character animation. I went to Cal Arts. I made a bunch of films. I did some music videos, worked on documentaries and stuff. And then I got into motion graphics. So I did a lot of After Effects. And then after a while, I was like, this AR thing is really cool. I've always been really interested in like what's going to be next in technology, which is something I was also really interested in college. And so now I'm like, hey, I can be enabled to do this AR stuff, taking all my old skills and applying them forward. So just briefly here on the top, we've got just some filters I've made that are either for clients or for myself, using some of my own characters, working with a musician on like a promotion for one of his albums. And on the bottom, we've got on the right side, that's co-stars. It's a Kickstarter I did that is for AR enabled drink coasters. And so you could select different worlds, and each world is like forest friends. Then you get little forest characters, and then like depending on day or night, they're doing day or night activities. You can also select the tea cats, and as you can see, they're going to enjoy tea with you. In the middle is RC Kaiju. This is a project I initially did at Indiecade, and then I brought this over to when I did a cohort at AR House, beloved AR House, and I worked with a brilliant programmer who helped me make them interactive. So I got to design and animate all of these characters, and on the far end is just an example of a painting that I've done, like an acrylic painting that then I augmented, and I gave it like sparklies and stuff, so you actually walk up to the painting and it's augmented. So I'm like all over the space when it comes to 2D, like visuals, and now coming more into the 3D space. So that is me. Hello. And that is it for us. Here is the panel.
Cool. So all of these things we've been showing, we all had a different start in life and different path to getting where we are today. So maybe we can start off with asking by what tools did you start using and end up where we are today? Maybe we start with Andy.
Yeah, well, so yeah, like I said, I started as a screenwriter. I started doing sketches on YouTube and things of that nature. And throughout the whole thing, I always knew that there was new mediums for telling those kinds of stories that hadn't been touched yet, and most importantly, I hadn't been exposed to yet because I hadn't allowed myself to enter that community. As someone who's not a developer first, it took a while for me to have the cojones to engage with this space because I didn't think I was worthy of it. And as soon as I did, once you found a community, we found each other through the AR house. Immediately, I would bring up ideas that were just abstract concepts in my mind, and people would tell me, no, you can do that right now, and I can tell you how those tools work, and it just took off from there.
So my background was 2D animation, and so a lot of motion graphics. So the tools I brought in were basically, it was like, how can I do things that are flat, but in 3D space? And how can I make it interactive? So using like a lot of motion graphics to be like, well, I know how to make things like look really pretty, and I can figure out like thinking about it from like a sculptural standpoint. If I've got like a 3D, or if I've got like an illustration that's illustrated to look like it's got a lot of depth, how can I like take that and kind of slice it? So I'll just like take like the part that would be like in the forefront, like maybe the nose of a little character that's looking up at you, like a little mouse, and be like, all right, I'm going to separate the nose from the rest of the face, from the torso, from the lower legs to the tail, and then like stack everything this way. So I'm thinking like, how can I take 2D elements and then like kind of break it into 3D a little bit and arrange it in a way in 3D space in AR that's going to be convincing, and then also convincing, like figuring out ways that are going to prevent the user from viewing from angles that are going to break the illusion too. So at the same time, there's like kind of a lot of stumbling and discovery along the way. Like there's no hard set rules at the start, you know, we're kind of all building this stuff. So yeah, and then like being able to bring animation into it and building those illusions from like the 2D space. So for me, yeah, taking 2D and bringing that into 3D space, thinking of it like animated pop-up books, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it was kind of a similar space. Like you worked more with like hand-drawn 2D, whereas like for me it was more like, oh, let's take these 2D effects and make them look like they're live action. So you gotta fake the depth and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, like I start working with real-time engines, like, oh, I don't have to fake it anymore. I can just actually, it's supposed to go here and I can just draw it that way. And so it's like kind of, yeah, like a lot of the sides of my brain that were designed for faking effects for a 2D deliverable, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can take that same part of my brain, but then instead of faking it, just actually do it in 3D space. And so for stuff like that, like Unreal Engine is kind of where I got started. And then it was actually at Reality Hack when I realized like, oh, I'm doing a lot of things correctly. It's just my computer is really slow. So I'm better at this than I actually thought I was. Because like they had, like for us, they had these workstations that Microsoft brought over. So all of a sudden it was like, I went from like a old PC that was like 5 years old to like a brand new with like a workstation graphics card PC, and I'm like, oh, everything I was doing was the right way before. I'm like a little bit further along than I thought. And so yeah, like I think Unreal was kind of that gateway, and like a lot of what I was learning was kind of how to pipe things through that. And then as I wanted to start doing more stuff, it's like, you know, working with Allan and learning Lens Studio. Also like Aiden, who's in the crowd, is like the Lens Studio like master, who's also there during our cohort, teaching us stuff, you know. And yeah, doing that cohort was like, it was like a month of just like, okay, like screw your other responsibility, just make stuff you find really fun for a full month. Like that's your job for this month. It's like, you kind of have the other stuff, you got to pay the bills and all that, but like really like there's so little excuse to just work on cool stuff. And so it's like, you know, sometimes it'd be like helping friends with like photogrammetry projects. It's like, I had done like small photogrammetry scans, but then like two of our cohort members were like, oh, we need that entire mountain. And so I'm like, well, I have a drone license. Let's figure out how to do this and see if it runs, you know? And so, yeah, it's just like, you know, I think one of the things we're going to bring up over and over again is community. It's like we all found the right group of friends to work on these projects with together. That doesn't have to be in person, but when it is in person, it's like so much easier. Like there's no like lag in the communication. It's like, oh, I'm doing this thing. Oh, no, just move that way. And it's like, cool, now it's working. So having that group of friends around you, and then once you do build those in-person connections, then it's like I know who to ask when I'm having issues with specific problems that I'm like dealing with, and it's like you have like a whole Discord group full of people that are like phone of friends that you can be like, how do I do the thing? Why is the thing not working? Why is the thing not thinging? And so, yeah, it's like, I think the combination of those skills really helps.
I want to just quickly add on to that everyone who was at AR House also came from very different backgrounds, as you can tell.
Yeah.
And that was so cool because now we all, like Pratik said, we all have like phone a friend with each other. It's like if you need an expert in something, you have an expert in something. So, and I think that's also really magical about AR and XR. It's like you do have a lot of people from all kinds of different backgrounds that are coming into this new community and defining new things. Like it's very exciting. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I was in school and they were trying to teach us C++ and it was super boring. So I luckily found this language called processing. I don't know if you guys know about that. And then I got into projection mapping from there. So that was kind of like my entry into AR. But yeah, talking about where we come from, and now we should talk about where we are today and what kind of tools are you using every day for the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, so what really excites me the most, like they were saying about community, is when I started to go to these community events, I was introduced to technology that, one, I didn't know was so intuitive for someone like me, and two, I didn't even know existed, which is one of the big problems in the space right now. If you're not in the space, it's hard to know about what's going on. So when I started attending these events, all of a sudden someone was like, hey, have you heard of Wonder Dynamics? And I was like, no. And they're like, well, it's basically a one-click tool to be able to animate, do full CGI lit animation. It's got a lot of pitfalls, but it's a very cool tool that all of a sudden now I'm doing collaborative pieces with AI and creating an entirely new form of entertainment that I didn't know could be done by myself before. ChatGPT-4 has been something I've been exploring a lot as a screenwriter, because I know the big question in the space right now is how will AI affect film? How will it affect screenwriters? And so I thought instead of shying away from that and being afraid of it, I would do a video exploring that to its fullest at what this tech can do now. And I did a video where I used ChatGPT-4 to write a film for me. I filmed the film, and then I animated it with Wonder Dynamics. Spoiler alert, turns out it wasn't that great. It turns out it's not there yet because it's missing the human spirit. But the thing that I found most interesting, yeah, it was like a little, the story was like, I think this is how a human should interact with the world. And you could tell it's how it thought it should and not how humans actually interact.
We're still safe.
Yeah, but yeah, we're safe is what I'm saying.
For another month.
Yeah, give it a couple years. Yeah, until they get sentient.
Yeah.
But that's something that I found amazing is that using it as a collaboration tool is a lot more effective. And, so now I can take something, write it, feed it through the ChatGPT, take maybe one of its 10 notes, and turn that into something wholly new that I wouldn't have even thought about. When you're bouncing ideas off another human, they come up with human ideas. And every once in a while, the AI will give you that little nugget that gives you a whole new window into how you want to tell your story. So that's a lot of the tools I've been working with.
So the tools I started with in AR were AR.js, which is all web-based, and I'm still using AR.js to this day. Like, I love web AR. But then after that, I was working with I worked in advertising for a long time, and so I went to go get a gig at one of the advertising agencies, and they were like, hey, so what have you been up to these days? And I was like, well, I'm playing with AR.js, and they're like, oh, you're into AR. Well, we want to do an Instagram filter for one of our clients. Could we just pay you for a day to learn Spark and then you could make the filter? I was like, yes, you absolutely can teach me or give me a day to learn Spark AR, which is the platform that Instagram filters are made in. So then after that, I was like, hey, there's money in this. This is great. It's really intuitive. Once you get over some hurdles about what is this? It's kind of a weird space. I hadn't played with Unity or any sort of game engine before that. And so coming into it, it was a little bizarre, but now it's all just node-based programming and making logic. And I mean, like Allan, I also worked in processing back in college, and it was like, well, I understand how to program. I'm not good at syntax, but I could just make block-based programs and interactions, and then like bring in the assets and try to keep everything under 4 megabytes. Oh my gosh! So Spark is Spark's basically what I use now for doing Instagram or for doing AR content, because everyone's got Instagram on their phone. So it might not be the strongest of tools compared to the other options out there, but you can still do a lot with it. And sometimes working with the limitations can be a lot of fun. And then lately, because of all of the community and everything, I've been working more in Unity. So I've started to learn Unity, and I've got like really good mentors with that, and my coworkers and everyone's just like really supportive with that. And now I'm like, all right, now that I'm starting to play a little more with Unity, and I'm seeing like all these incredible things you can do with AR in Unity, I'm like, I'm feeling more powerful. So it's like one tool leads to another, to another, to another, as you get interested in these things. As Pratik was saying about like, you know, it's like, I have this goal, I'm going to make this project. How am I going to get there? So it's just like a little carving away at like all the tech knowledge there is out there over time. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then for me, it's like kind of the same approach I took with Unreal is like, because it has a node-based language, that made it really easy to start picking up programming logic. And then I knew a little bit of Python from before and a little bit of C# because my brother kind of forced me to try and learn it during the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, it's like I had put that off to the side and spent all this time focusing on like, oh, learning blueprints and learning that logic. And then I go back to it, I'm like, oh, this all makes so much more sense now that I'm like revisiting it a year later after like actually learning how to program. And so it's like most of what I work in now is like the project we're working on in Unity, and then also just like taking these sort of open source AI projects and bringing them into AR. You can build these like amazing like multimodal agents and chains that interact with one another to do really cool things that up until now were really just, it was sci-fi shit, and it was like badly written sci-fi shit, but now it's all possible. And like, you know, it's it's like, especially once you jump into running these open source projects, either on your own server or your own instance, there's so many like powerful things you can do. You know, it's like GPT-4's multimodal capabilities haven't even been released to the public yet, but like, you don't really need that. Like, there's already these open source projects that will allow you to build chains that are like running specific functions that then interact with one another to create interactions and experiences that like just feel super unique. And so, yeah, that's what I'm working on now.
Yeah, and I think 2 years ago I fell in love with Lens Studio, and I started out doing a lens a day, and it's a super fast tool. You can literally make something in 30 seconds, and it will be on your phone 5 seconds after. And it's like, it's so fast that people are spending time in After Effects trying to fake AR content is slower than Lens Studio. So I think it's just, yeah, a wonderful tool. And yeah, obviously I'm biased. I'm on the Snap side, but yeah, I think it's just much more faster than Unity or any other game engine out there. So yeah.
A lens a day keeps the doctor away. ChatGPT wrote that, I swear. Okay, so let's move on to this, coming right off the top of my head. I got to scroll through my thoughts.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That was a good one right
Scroll,
there.
yeah. Here it is. So what skills from your previous career before you entered the AR and VR, MR, XR space became unexpectedly useful or pertinent to the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so for me, I probably spent 6 years doing product design, 3D printing, furnitures, and all that stuff. And I think, yeah, all the Arduino code translates a lot to what I'm doing today, but especially the 3D modeling. Industrial 3D modeling is a bit different from animating characters that you can talk to, but it's not that far from each other in reality. So I think just, yeah, modeling, prototyping, I'll maybe most of all describe myself as a prototyper, and then I hand off stuff afterwards to the real engineers. But yeah, I think just the prototyping mindset is probably the one that I always carry with me.
I'll go. Yeah, for me specifically, it was something that I found really applicable to the type of content I'm creating, and I think unique in the space is, as a stand-up comedian, everything is about pacing. And when I do a set, it's always set up, punchline. It's all about keeping the flow of entertainment going and keeping the pace in a way where people don't have time to drop off, because it's always like this. And what I realized is there weren't a lot of creators, especially on YouTube right now, in the VR space, who were thinking of the pacing of their videos as like a stand-up set, where the VR game or the AR game or the tool you're showcasing serves as a medium for a full comedic experience, you know, with setup punchlines, with callbacks, all of that. And so that was something that I found immediately fascinating to myself as I was just improvising my way, stumbling through these experiences. I found myself sort of naturally falling into the rhythm of a set that creates a video and a product that is a lot more, I think, dynamic than some of the more drier and technical things that have been out there in the space. And as a result, a lot of the people, the number one comments I get on my videos are from people who don't know about VR, don't know about AR. They found my video because I titled it, you know, talking to a creepy AI girlfriend. And all of a sudden, they're turned on to all these tools. And like, I didn't know this exists. I didn't even know about ChatGPT. You know, I use Midjourney within it. And now I've got all these people who had never even heard of the space going and exploring and finding the piece of it that they connect with just because they wanted to find a video to laugh at for 5 minutes. And that's what I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, so things that I took from my past. So working in advertising, one of the important things we had was doing graphic design and immediately communicating as someone's scrolling through their feed. It's like, what are you trying to communicate? You need to get that through really fast. Like, what's the vibe? What are you trying to sell? What should they get excited about? And so when it comes to doing UX and UI in AR or XR, you have to be able to, you know, onboard someone as quickly and easily as possible. And also having a film background, like editing and making sure, like, let's say that you're starting a film, you want to introduce the characters and the scenario and all of this. And instead of having a long exposition that's saying, well, here's our character and they've got this long backstory and today they're going to do da, 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 da. It's like, no, throw the viewer into the action and like put them into like the crisis that the character is in, and then imply all of the context. So that's something that's really important in XR. Is it's like, if you're gonna like pick up a filter or something, you want to immediately be able to understand, how does this work? How do I use it? What does it do? And sometimes it's from like seeing other people use it and having those expectations, but it's also like, how can you build those expectations into the actual form factor of it? So that's been really, really useful, bringing that from like graphic design and advertising background. Another part of this is having a degree in character animation, you know, having an emotional connection to people. So, you know, in real life, we're used to interacting with each other. Dogs that we see on the streets, even like plants and flowers have like a sort of like kind of character, and they're all alive. So they all kind of have like a sort of emotion assigned to them. And I mean, we can even like look at clouds and say like, oh, that looks like a grumpy cloud. Like it kind of reminds me of Grumpy Cat or something. So I think being able to, you know, if we're going to be working in augmented reality, how do we make it so we're having those emotional connections with things that we're making in the actual space that we're in? And so a lot of this can be done in animation, which is my background. I'm going to just, yeah, you're all about Snap. I'm all about animation. So like there's so much you could do with personality of how something acts. That's like, is it happy to see you? Is it like cold and scared? Like you can imply these things through like how's the motion graphics, how do these things like actually interact with you? You can build in personality into the stuff that's in your environment in AR or XR or VR, whatever, and that is again implying a lot of context of like how do you interact with these things? What are going to be your expectations with these? So yeah, instead of just being like, bam, here's something that exists in the space with you, it's like bringing a little bit of emotional context and those expectations that are built into the design innately of whatever it is. So that's me.
Yeah. I think for me, a big thing that I brought over, so when you're editing content, doesn't matter if it's like a 30-second video or like a whole feature-length film, it usually doesn't take that long to get your first cut. And it takes most of the time to actually polish that into something that flows correctly, that feels nice, that has that effect. So the skill that like I didn't realize it at the time, but ended up becoming the most useful as I went through this transition, is just that eye for polish and that eye for like, oh, what are the quick little things I can do that are gonna make it feel so much better? Like sometimes it's with animations, a lot of times it's with lighting. It's like, you know, like real-time lighting has gotten a lot better with most of these tools that we use, but like you can add a slight, like if you know your experience is gonna be outdoors, add a daylight grade to it, and then all of a sudden it's going to mesh into your scene so much better. If you know this is going to be an experience at night and like the lights are going to be dim, add like a cooler grade to it so it feels that way. Those little effects that we would use to kind of cheat reality in film and kind of, you know, if you're shooting day for night or whatever, you have to learn a lot about color theory and the way color changes. The light from the sun is like completely different during the daytime and the nighttime. And you can do that all artificially. And we learn how to do that when we're color grading. So you can apply that same philosophy to your AR projects, and it just gives that extra sense of immersion to them, you know. And then the other thing is like looking for performances. It's like, I think Tahnee, you came more from like animated background, so looking for like animated heightened emotions, whereas for me it was you know, I got started working with Metahumans and I could instantly, I had a sense for like, oh, like I did this performance wrong, let me keep doing it until all of a sudden, even though it's in the uncanny valley, if the emotions are there, you can kind of get people to look past it. And like that's something that's come in really, like a lot of my work is kind of comedic. I'm kind of a goofy person. And so like you want sometimes things that feel real and unreal at the same time, and like working in these engines I think really enables people to do that. And so yeah, and then I think the other thing that I brought over was just like a lot of my film projects, especially short films, I'm going to use a story from my thesis project back in college. They kind of veered off into the wrong directions because something got released right before I was about to start shooting. Something that I had wanted to mess with, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I got to use that. And so it's like I've always had that passion for combining storytelling with emerging tech, but sometimes with film, you kind of just need to lock down what you're going to do and pull it off. Whereas like now working, especially in emerging tech, like having that instinct all of a sudden went from a detractor to a benefit. A lot of my projects, it's like I've been like, oh, let me try that new project or that new repo that was just released, and all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, this is exactly what I was looking for. And over time, I've built up the skill to kind of identify when something is going to be a detractor and stay a detractor versus, oh, this might be something. But definitely having that experimental nature when you are a solo dev or an indie dev working with small teams helps a lot, because that's how you find that edge.
Allan? Yeah. So next question, totally off the top of my head. So what role did the pandemic play in your decision to enter this space and maybe pivot from the other work that you were doing prior? I think that's something that was a common theme among all of us. You want to start?
Yeah, so for me, I was heavily invested in hardware, supply chains, PCB design, weighting, and so on. So when the pandemic kicked in and raw materials went up by 10%, electronics got delayed by 3 months, and everything just got expensive, it was pretty clear that this was the time to just switch over to software instead, and also like only 10% of all investments goes into hardware. Usually people get a software company acquired and then starting building hardware. I was kind of doing the opposite, which was kind of, so I'm glad I switched to software. It's faster, no waiting time, it's all on you. But yeah.
Awesome. And yeah, for me, again, I was pivoting from, you know, prior to the pandemic, I was doing 7 live stand-up shows a week. And as soon as that happened, basically my whole lifestyle was like put on pause, like a lot of people. But I knew I wanted to put that energy into a new place, so I had to find a new medium to transition that into. So I started doing the VR comedy videos just as a way to keep my improv loose. And then after doing that for a little while, I was contacted by the head of Fail to Render, which is a VR comedy club company that we've been working with for 3 years now. And he was like, hey, I saw your stand-up comedy. I saw that you do VR videos. We're doing a VR comedy club. That's kind of the perfect marriage. And we started doing these shows in alt space. Rest in peace. Microsoft hates us. But it was amazing. You know, all of a sudden, because I was doing Zoom shows, and I don't know if you've ever seen stand-up comedy on Zoom. It's not comedy. It's just a sad therapy session. It was like, hey, so how about that airline food? And then you stare at a blank screen of names. Like, yeah, it's good. And so as soon as I did that, I knew that Zoom was not the answer for virtual comedy. It didn't make sense. It took out the real-world aspect, because comedy works because you're in a room experiencing it together. When something happens in the room and the comedian reacts to it, we all create a new moment organically in that moment. And over Zoom, that's just not possible. But once we started doing the alt space shows, we would tell everybody, turn all your mics on so we can hear everybody laugh. You can see all the heads. You can see the hands. You can start doing crowd work. You know, I'd see a blue avatar come in and just rip on James Cameron's avatar for a while. You'd see people, you know, pull up portals, and you could say, you know, it's fantastic that someone's trying to leave this into another dimension in the middle of my set. You know, all of a sudden these like little comedic moments that can't happen anywhere else can happen there, and everyone laughs and interacts with it in real time, in a real space, virtually. And I found that absolutely mind-blowing. And ever since then, I've been all in on this, because I know it's at the very least the future for a lot of entertainment that hasn't been done yet and will soon continue to grow.
Cool. So in the pandemic, you know, I was like, all right, I have a lot of time on my hands as an artist. I have like a whole bunch of ideas I've been wanting to do. And of course, I have like a booklet full of AR projects that I'd been like dying to make. So I was like, all right, I want to make these augmented reality drink coasters because it makes sense. You're going to have a panel or like a marker on a drink coaster. It's a solid thing, like, and it's portable. It's perfect. It's the perfect format. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Kickstarter for this. And, you know, coming from 2D character animation background and motion graphics, which when I say motion graphics, I'm talking After Effects, like moving around PSDs and working with film and everything. I didn't know anything about 3D. I mean, I did. They tried to teach us in college, but in college we're like, no, we're here to do 2D animation, not 3D animation. So I had some of the concepts of 3D animation and like 3D modeling and all of that understood, but I never actually applied it. So I was like, all right, this is my time to learn something new, time to go in and learn Blender. So thank you, YouTube. I learned so much about Blender. I went in the course of 2 months, I went from like, okay, I could kind of barely model a thing. Yeah, I can model it and maybe paint it. I didn't know what a UV map was or anything like that. But I just like started scavenging on YouTube. I put together this, anytime I found a good tutorial, I would put it into a playlist that was called CG Toots. So just like, if I needed these tutorials, I would just like go hit that. And if anyone is interested in like learning about CG, like I'm like, here's my path. And it has like all these things for like Spark, AR, etc. But Blender especially. So I just like slowly started to learn. I was like, all right, what's going on with my paintings? What can I make? Oh, I gotta like do UV unwrapping. Okay, what is a UV map? What are UV textures? Oh, okay. So I go and like, I learn all of this. So then in the course of 2 months, I was like modeling, painting, rigging, animating my models. And I had like built out characters for this entire like little AR ecosystem that I built. I made a Kickstarter. It was successful. It's very small, but still, I made it. And then now I've taken those skills of like Blender, and I got to a point where I could start to like if I had an issue, I could figure it out on my own. I could like do. I was my own tech support. I was like, yes, I feel powerful. I've like leveled up from beginner to intermediate. And so like learning Blender was kind of like a huge thing I did during the pandemic. And also it was like, hey, I have a product now. Now I can do like AR, and I could go around and say like, hey, I am an AR artist. Like this is kind of what I want to get into now. Like I'm kind of like easing out of motion graphics. I'm really interested in this XR stuff. So here, me as an indie, you know, I was a freelancer, but it was like anyone has the power to do this. Like if you just like take the time and you're like, I want this skill, I want to do this project. Like if you set aside a project and you like kind of scope it out and you're like, all right, this is my game of action. Like, here's my goal. What's going to be realistic as you start to learn things? And don't get too discouraged. Like, along the way, you might find, like, hey, I need to, like, totally pivot and go this other direction because this thing that I thought was possible turns out it's literally impossible. The technology just isn't there. I've even had clients come to me with, like, hey, can we do, like, a Palm Reader in Spark AR? I was like, no, I'm sorry. Like, the technology will not allow for that. But anyway, it's okay to take these twists and turns, and then, you know, along the way, you're going to like develop your own path and make your own uniqueness as an indie developer. And, you know, again, like ask your community or like go online and find community. Like I didn't know a lot of stuff on this, on like the JavaScript side of things for like the web development. And so I just went online. I was like, hey, so-and-so, I saw you made this GitHub repository. I don't even understand what GitHub is right now. I do now, wink. But back then it was like, I just reached out. I was like, hey, can you help me with this? And she was like, oh, yeah. yeah, that actually doesn't work. Let me like help you out with getting the code to work. And then she like helped me get GIFs working on CoStars, which was super, super cool. So again, community is great. And if you've got like a little goal or something that you think is like out of reach, just like make a small project and shoot for it and go for it. And yeah, and YouTube is your friend. So yeah, that's what I did over pandemic.
Yeah. For me, it was, yeah, it's like I knew learning 3D was something I needed in terms of my VFX path of the career that I was going down. So I started learning Cinema 4D and things like that, and then I started getting really annoyed because it took forever to see how things looked, and you didn't really ever get accurate lighting until you've actually rendered the thing out, and especially when you're working with a bit of a potato computer, it's like that takes a really long time. And so then I'm like, okay, what can I do? There has to be a better way. Like, it was 2020, like we have to be able to see what things at least kind of look like in real time. And that's when my brother, who had been working in Unity, he's like, oh, try Unity. I'm like, oh, this looks like shit. And so I'm like, and then he's like, okay, try Unreal. Like, film people like Unreal. And then around the same time, like The Mandalorian had just come out, and they released their sort of behind the scenes featurette on how they're using the volume. And like, in the short teaser, they kind of just hint at it. They're like, oh, we're using this thing called Unreal Engine to run the whole wall. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should try learning that, because this seems like it might be useful going forward for film. So then I start learning little things. First of all, how to connect my camera up to Unreal. So all of a sudden, the movement from my camera is being reflected on the screens. Because like, you don't need an LED wall to get started with that stuff. You can just set up a projector. And so it's like little by little, first, it wasn't even like full, complete projects that I wanted to do. It was more like a thing I wanted to get done. And that's where YouTube University comes in. Far more valuable than any public university or private.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, whoop, whoop. You know,
I'm a graduate.
yeah, shout out Winbush and Corridor Crew and
Obscure Nerd VR.
Yeah, you're not going to learn anything helpful on my channel.
And so it's like, you know, you start going down, and then all of a sudden it's like you see like, oh, I was trying to do this thing, and this random person on the other side of the country has a whole tutorial series where they're breaking it down. It's a little bit dry, but you can listen to it on like 1.5 times speed and figure out the key pieces that you need to learn. And so it was a lot of that. And then at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I think I know enough to where I can kind of piece together a thing. And I started doing that a little bit. But here's where that artist side came in the way. I am a perfectionist, and so I did not want to release anything unless it was perfect. So then when things started coming out, all of a sudden I started going to these things called hackathons. MIT Reality Hack, shout out. And so going there, it's like, okay, you can try and make things perfect, but you got 2 days, so you got to turn it in at the end of the 2 days. And so the first project I did there, it's like my responsibility was an animated pirate. And I spent as much time as I could making sure that pirate looked real. It had great hair physics. I re-recorded myself doing the voices and the animations over and over and over again. And I got to do that. But at the end of the 2 days, I'm like, the performance is locked in. You got to render it out and deliver it. And it was great. It was all of a sudden, it's like, these things I was obsessing over, I realized like, oh, like I probably could have shipped the version like 20 takes ago and it would have worked. And then once again, it's like going to these events, going to AR house parties and things like that. You build up that community. And so it's like these random things that I had started piecing together during the pandemic, all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're like puzzle pieces, and you could start seeing the greater picture of the puzzle. So yeah, that was my pandemic journey.
So not much.
Yeah, it was very uneventful. There was lots of boredom, lots of, are things ever going to open up again?
So I think before we get to the Q&A, just if anyone has any other, we already touched on this a bit, but if anyone has anything additional they want to talk about, the importance of, so like we said, we all connected from very different lifestyles through the AR house, which was a community of like-minded people in the space. So if anyone has anything else they'd like to talk about the importance of that community and how it got you to where you are now.
I think the real takeaway is that was the shortcut for all of us. And so it was like, yeah, it's like, whether you do it through Discord or you do it in person, it's like you got to find your people, because that makes the whole process so much funner along the way. It makes you can laugh at your frustrations instead of just getting frustrated by what's frustrating you. There's like it's so much better to go through this stuff when you're with people who give a shit about you. And that's I think what we all kind of found through AR House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so should we just open up to the Q&A now?
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions?
Beautiful. Wow. Yes, yes, yes. Awesome. Hey, my name is Lex.
Lex.
I love you guys. You guys bring this real, indie game developer ethos and kind of the funness, the reason we all kind of started to this AWV. So thank you for bringing that real magic. And on to kind of and diving back into indie gaming, right? Into making creating with new technology. And you guys all mentioned AR House. I mean, such good times, such in the right thing, like one-day hackathons, the right diverse community, great parties. That is literally like history, and I love that we've cemented that. What do you guys think about like what's next? And you mentioned some like tutorials that you could compile together, and I love how you guys are like already like growing into the mentors, and mentoring the next generation. So tell me what your goals, what your dreams are to as a mentor, like as being the next generation.
Yes.
First, let's just say Lex is one of the OGs. And
I love you all.
And he is also part of the reason why AR House is one of the greatest places. He has amazing energy, but yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of the really cool stuff that's around the corner is the way AI makes interactions feel more natural. So it's like all of a sudden, like before, it's like if your game starts out where you have to kind of choose a place you're starting, right? Instead of having a person drag their mouse or tap a thing, you could just have them say it, and they don't have to even say the exact word. So it's like if it's a forest, a city, or a beach, like they could be like, oh, a lush beach, that's kind of like this, da 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 da, and then you can use like a combo of Whisper and GPT to funnel that into those three things. So for the user, it feels like they're coming up with this thing that's completely natural, da da da. But like you as a developer, you kind of know, I kind of added a layer of smoke and mirrors, right? But then you can do that, like build on top of that further. And so when you are building things out, you can make them feel more natural and more customized still have an experience that's on Rails. And so it's like the way interactions are changing because people are just like, if you look at the rapid pace of the AI, like open source AI space, like it gets really hard to keep track of it. Like my morning routine for a while was like, first 2 hours, like let's go through Twitter, let's go through Reddit, let's go through GitHub, Hugging Face, see exactly what's coming out. And it got to the point where I'm like, I just need to make the stuff. I need to choose my tool set because this is giving me anxiety. Like the fact that there's so much new stuff, I'm like, I'm gonna pick a thing and it's gonna be replaced before I even ship the thing.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, that doesn't matter. Just pick the thing that works for your project,
But even that, like your take on it, right? Your knowledge and experience of bringing that to the selection of AI tools, even kind of framing everything into the on Rails, right? Like instead of giving people the open world, which is like the natural assumption, you create the restriction of on Rails, and now you can really leverage it. So yeah, exactly this. Like literally, you guys are now the teachers. When just a year ago or two, you were the students, and this is magical transformation. It's beautiful. It's that butterfly metamorphosis, and it's beautiful to see.
Yeah, and you too, Alex. And I would say my advice would be stop following the buzzwords and just stick to your product, right? Most of us are making AR games or AR experiences or VR comedy sets or whatnot. But just keep that in mind. And people who say, oh, AI is going to have such and such a big impact on AR, well, how do you think we do speech recognition in the first place? It's already there. So just focus on the products and don't follow the buzzwords because all the wrong people are doing that.
Yeah, make what you want to make because you're going to have something really unique and special and follow that because only you can come up with that, and then other people will be like, hey, that's really cool. So yeah, follow your heart with making things.
That's the best talk of GDC, of AWE. And GDC, why not?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, I think the role that I want to continue to play is inviting new people into the community. You know, I should get a commission from Meta because I've sold like 20 Quest headsets to comedians, to actors, to people who thought it was dumb as hell. And I would tell them I was a VR comedian a year ago and they'd laugh at me. When I tell them that now, they're like, I want to know what that's about because people are hearing about it more and more, and you put the headset on once, get them on a virtual stage, and all of a sudden the community is just growing and growing and growing, and they're going out finding tools they like, and it just continues to spread.
All right, I got a question. Did you guys have any sort of unexpected discoveries in any of your projects where you're like trying to do one thing and then you just kind of learn something new, and then next thing you know, you're like totally just like moving on and working on something else? Because I feel like that happens a lot when you're like working with new tools.
I think with the limitations, absolutely. Like, there's just limitations in tech, and you think that you're going one way, and it's like, oh, wait, I can't do this. You know, you hit a wall. And I was trying to make like a 3D painting app in Spark to just like sculpt and paint in 3D space, and there were some technical limitations I hit, but then it was like, oh, this opens up something that's really, really cool on the other side. So I have a filter that you could like paint in space, and it was just, yeah, you start with like a goal over here, and it's like, I see the landmark, but the path is taking me over here instead. And it's like still kind of similar, like it's in the same vein, but yeah, I can't say anything's been like super disparate from the original goal. How about you guys?
For me, it happens kind of like all the time. You have this, and I think I learned not to overthink and overplan everything and try to, oh, I need to take a shower to come up with good ideas or whatever. I think all the good ideas comes essentially when you stop procrastinating and put in the work. You get the best ideas and just start doing that and follow your instinctions. Of course, sometimes you run into technical things you can't solve and you just need to change direction. So I think your success depends on how fast you can realize that and stop crying about things and be happy that you learned about them. But yeah.
Any other questions before we?
So I think this area hasn't been really touched on during this talk, but what are some sources or ways you have found, basically how do you make money as a freelance artist in this new and emerging space?
For me, Spark AR filters for brands. So just making, it's like, hey, all right, we've got like a paint brand and we want to promote our new paint that came out. All right, well, you can, what color is your paint aura? Or sometimes, and so for me, that's usually working through ad agencies. They're like, hey, we're getting these gigs, but also like other friends reach out and they're like, hey, we've got like this gig, but you're like more of a specialist at this than I am. So, you know, again, having that community that can help you out. So yeah, Spark AR filters, everyone's got Instagram. Yeah.
I think for me, it's just like kind of putting out demos of the things I'm working on and then using that to like get other gigs, be they for friends projects. Sometimes it's like a friend of a friend, or like a lot of times it's like, especially with like my Metahuman work, it's like it was very distinctive at the time I was releasing it because I was like one of the first people who was messing with that stuff. And so all of a sudden it's like anytime somebody needed a Metahuman thing, it was like I was getting hit up. And so I got to work on like couple of films, on a theater production, and a bunch of really fulfilling projects just because of some silly demos I put out of a pirate and of Napoleon and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me personally, as a content creator and an entertainer, I didn't know if I would be able to make money in this space. But I've been partnering with a lot of different VR companies and a couple AR companies who are looking for new ways to market and new ways to create content. So that's really been my main source of revenue through this is, you know, they'll reach out to me and say, we saw your video, we thought it was really funny, and we want somebody to represent our product in a more fun, engaging way like that, and it becomes a whole new avenue for marketing beyond just telling them what the product is, but showing how fun it can be to figure out that experience.
Yeah, no, I think most people in this space are unfortunately not making money. We're doing it because we think it's fun. For me, I've been lucky to get some grants, but they're also running short now, so we'll see. Otherwise, it's the typical way is to do brand deals with Nike, try-on lenses, e-commerce. Fashion is pretty big right now. Hopefully, we start moving away from all the face filters and into more exciting things. But let's see.
I think we have like 3 minutes left, so maybe one more question and we can.
I just wanted to thank you guys for being so candid about how you got started, and also it's very disarming. You know, I think there's a theme where you know, everyone out here has hit a wall in trying to learn, you know, watching a bad YouTube video or something. And so I think just hearing that you've gotten past this and that you have these same things is really helpful. I guess if there's a consensus on, you know, you guys all have different niches, but if there's a consensus, would you say, you know, there are a couple tools that you would say are indispensable so that you really can't go wrong learning them? Because I think it's also been pointed out that, you know, hey, I went down this path, but that doesn't matter anymore. So is there a consensus on maybe what the most important tools are from the group?
I think we all use different tools.
Yeah.
So a guy, he tried to learn me Blender maybe like 8 years ago, and I was like, no, it's not precise. I can't use it for 3D printing and whatnot. I think that was my biggest mistake in life, not learning Blender early on. It's still relevant today, and it's open source, it's free. Aiden talks a lot about it as well. So I think, yeah, just being able to create 3D models is probably the first step you want to take, and then making them interactive afterwards. And that can be done in almost any game engine. So I think the game engine is not that important, but I would say Blender is my suggestion.
But I'm also now thinking like AI might be a good thing too. Like I don't really use AI myself, but I just saw something that was like on Twitter this morning. It was like, look at all these amazing models that AI is spitting out. And you know, Andy, I could see you like using that instead of being like, oh man, I gotta like learn how to do like artistic things in Blender. You could just be like, make me this weird creature, and bam, now you have a 3D model, and then plug that into Wonder Spaces, right? Or
Wonder Dynamics.
Wonder Dynamics, yeah. So that's I could see AI maybe being really powerful for that. I really think everyone's going to have their own.
And yeah, with Blender, right, you have all these crazy plugins now that you have AI stuff for texturing and so on. Yeah, AI is not that good at generating 3D models yet, but I assume maybe 6 months down the road, we can start getting into that.
Yeah, I think learning like basically prompting and like multi-chain prompting especially, like a lot of people, they're like, I used AI for code and it spit out inaccurate code and so it's bad at coding. It's like, no, you got to learn how to A, prompt it correctly, B, feed back the errors you're getting. And like, the thing is, like, as somebody who sucks at coding, being able to use AI to help me with that process, like the most powerful thing is not ChatGPT, it is the actual open AI playground where you can add in your own system prompt. And so all of a sudden it's like, you know what, if I want like help with Unreal blueprints, if I just use like regular ChatGPT and even switch it to GPT-4, it's probably gonna suck around 50% of the time. But if I go into the playground and all of a sudden, right, like, you know, kind of soften its ego a little bit. Be like, you are the best at Unreal Engine 5. You are so good at blueprints. You are like the most talented person at spitting this stuff out. And then you ask your questions. All of a sudden, you're gonna get a lot better answers. Like silly little things like that work. The AI is sensitive, guys.
Appease the AI.
Yeah, and then once again, it gets back to like a lot of the really cool stuff is like, I think one of the most useful things, and it's agnostic of the engines and the tools, but it's a skill of learning what type of systems and APIs can be linked together. Once you kind of learn those type of things, then it's like, it doesn't matter if you're building in Unity or Unreal or Lens Studio. It's like, you have that sixth sense of like, oh, this is possible or this is not possible. And I think that's been like super useful for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that is our time. So I would say learn the AI girlfriend apps. That's my tool.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. Thank you all for being here.